Mike came to the playground late at night. The sun had already set behind our house, darkness fell in the yard. All around was quiet, only somewhere in the distance a truck rumbled and a dog barked. The air smelled like grass cuttings. A patch of trampled lawn, a homemade gate with a leaky net and a couple of benches instead of stands. It didn't look too much like the football stadiums Mike saw on TV, but it was still impressive. There was some kind of magic here, it was drawn near. When the game began, the rest of the world seemed to cease to exist. All the troubles disappeared from the head, the quarrels of the parents, the school were forgotten. Even the sores passed. Mike loved this place, only he was rarely taken to the game. He threw an old darn ball onto the lawn, moved with it to the goal, beating invisible opponents, and with all the strength he threw it under the crossbar. The net fluttered. Mike jumped up, waved his hands in celebration of the scored goal, but immediately looked around. Doesn't anyone see? Local boys laughed at him anyway, came up with offensive nicknames and could take on the team only if there was no one to put on the gate. And with each missed goal, Michael's nicknames were added. But now no one was watching him. The windows in the houses were slowly extinguished, and the entrance doors were slamming less and less. That is why Michael loved this time. There are practically no people on the street, everyone is sitting in their apartments and getting ready for bed. And the playground belongs only to him, and no one will drive him out of here. He pounded about 50 heads when he heard the dog again. Now she was barking much closer, somewhere behind the house. And not just barking, but tore at his throat, as if it were completely brutal. Michael even imagined a bared mouth, sharp teeth, drooling saliva on the ground. He shivered. He did not want to stumble upon a mad dog. But I didn't even want to go home and get hit in the neck by the folder just for the fact that he, Michael, was once born. I didn't want to look at my mother's tears, at her bruises. I didn't want to see how. The barking stopped abruptly, the dog screeched, and in the next instant, the sound of breaking bones echoed across the yard. Michael thought his own bones were crunching, it was so loud. Loud and eerie. He picked up the ball and began to turn his head around, peering into the darkness. Half of the lamps at the entrances were no longer lit. The wind drove small debris along the asphalt. Birds were busy in a feeder arranged on a birch. And at the corner of the house stood a tall man and looked directly at Michael. Legs buckled. In the silence that followed, Michael heard only the pounding of his own heart. He suddenly realized that here, in the cone of lantern light on the landing, he could not be overlooked. Michael took a step back mechanically, and the stranger did the same. It's like a wrong, slowed down reflection. Glass shattered on one of the upper floors. There was a scream and Michael shuddered. Far, far away, on the highway, a siren howled and immediately died down. Something was happening. Another one appeared next to the stranger. He, too, looked at Michael and strangely stretched out his arms in front of him, as if squeezing air. Or was holding an invisible ball. Michael's throat went dry. Sweat beaded on his forehead. He rushed towards his entrance, but noticed dark silhouettes on the landing. They seemed to be rooted in the ground. Mannequins hiding outside the lantern light. Waiting.
No. No.
Hearing a voice behind him, Michael screamed. The voice was distorted, not real, as if the person had not yet learned how to use it. Michael turned and saw Jim, a boy a year older, with whom he sometimes played here. He was one of the few who treated him normally.
Jim, what are you doing?
Jim stood a few steps from the football field, turned his head in different directions and did not dare to enter the spot of light. Gently stretched out his leg out of the darkness and immediately jerked it back. And then I tried again.
Jim? Help.
Michael was out of breath. The wind ruffled his uncut bangs, blew in with coolness, but brought with it terrible smells. The smells of fresh blood, rotten meat and a burning dump. Smells of the new Jim. The creature jerked forward, fell to the ground, roared, and crawled back into the darkness. She quickly got to her feet and began to approach the light in small steps. Michael saw a smile on the non-Jim's face, and a wave of goosebumps rose up his spine.
Leave me alone. Leave alone.
Michael threw a ball at him, then lifted a rock from the ground and threw the creature right in the head. It staggered, retreated a couple of meters and froze in place. And then clumsily copied Michael's movement. Crouched down and threw a non-existent stone at him. Once again. And further. Like repeating the weirdest exercise in gym class.
Leave me alone.
Michael no longer held back his tears. Screams and strange, irregular voices were heard from the darkness that covered the area. Alarms went off. Moving away from the creature, Michael pressed his back against the lantern. Buried in a saving light. Mosquitoes buzzed right under the lamp, a fly fluttered in the cobweb. Shadows rose around the patch of football field. What was pretending to be Jim groped a real stone on the ground and threw it towards Michael with incredible force. A lamppost clinked. The creature stared ahead of it for a few seconds, and then lifted its head higher. To a glass ball that gives birth to electric light. And Michael went cold. The shadows moved. A column of black smoke rose from behind the houses. Michael slumped to the ground, sobbing, and covered his head with his hands. The creature managed to break the lantern on the third attempt.